All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this live stream, and I got something really exciting for you today. We are going to be putting together lots of different story structures into one. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. So over here on the left, I have this document that I've been working on for the past little while, um, and each of these is a scene or a chapter. And I started basically, I've already obviously done a lot of work on this already. I started with the 24 chapter novel outline as my starting point. But one of the things that I have kind of figured out while looking at the 24 chapter novel outline is that it's not, um, it doesn't have like everything. It's a really good, concise model to follow, especially when you're just starting out. But if your chapters are like 2,000 words, let's say, you end up with a 50,000 word book at most. And, um, most books are a little longer than that. And so I thought, well, there's got to be like some stuff I'm missing. So I go and look out Save the Cat, Hero's Journey, and find that there are indeed some little steps here and there that could be added. There's obviously a whole lot of overlap between different story structures that are getting the same things, but just in different ways. But what I want to do is make sure I have a template that is split into specific scenes that will work with, that have pretty much everything that all of the major story structure gurus out there recommend. And so I've already got everything from the 24 chapter novel outline. I'm going to go through the 12-step hero's journey. Then we're going to go through the 17 step hero's journey. And then look at Save the Cat and see where we are for time at that point. I'm hoping to go probably a couple of hours here. So if you're also watching, be sure to say hi in the chat. I would love to chat with you while I go along. Have a couple of Q&As just scattered throughout. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and dive in. So, the 12-step chapter, or the 12-step hero's journey, was created by Christopher Vogler, and it's based on the works of Joseph Campbell. So you probably heard of Joseph Campbell as the guy who created the hero's journey. He actually had 17 steps, but Christopher Vogler, who was a screenwriter, he took it and simplified it into a 12-step. I almost said 12-step program. Hello, my name is Jason, and I'm a nerdy novelist. So 12-step beats. That's the Christopher Vogler version, and those work pretty well, particularly for screenplays. But I think with novels, we have the opportunity to we have a little more wiggle room in our structure than screenplays do. And so for that reason, I'm also going to, once we get done looking at the 12-step version here, I'm going to go and look at the 17-step, which is the one that Joseph Campbell originally put together. So let's start with step 1 of the 12-step. And this is the ordinary world. Now, pretty sure most of these things are already included in what I've developed over here so far. But we'll just read through it and see. Introduces the hero to the normal everyday life, as well as something that will soon come to disrupt it. This is the hook. Yeah, we pretty much got everything here for step 1. Because we have these first couple of chapters are all ordinary world stuff. Hello, everyone. I see a bunch of you here. Good to see you. All right, in this section, the hero is driven out of their everyday life. So this is the call to adventure, which I've got right here. Driven out of their everyday life and into the adventure, some heroes may be hesitant, require more than one call to adventure to raise the stakes and convince them to respond. Challenge, mission, or quest. Yeah, I've got all of this. Refusal of the call. Also got that. That's what I would call head in the sand right here. Some challenges are so threatening the hero has no choice but to accept quickly, while other challenges may need to gradually build to become dire enough to pressure the hero into action. Yeah, we've got a chapter here called Pull Out the Rug, which is where even though the protagonist is resisting the call to adventure, the pull out the rug moment comes where it's just like, you can't resist anymore. Like, you have to take action. So that's this bit here. Ultimately, the hero is left with no choice but to agree to the challenge. Which, by the way, the 12-step hero's journey also makes for a great template for a novella. If you want a novella, just make each one of these steps a single chapter. Because if this is a novel, like, these are multiple chapters per step here, right? But in a novella where you only have about 12 chapters, that can be a really good one. Okay, so that was Refusal of the Call. All right, here's one where I think we may be missing something. This is the introduction. So, meeting the mentor. Introduction to the person or item, which gives the hero the confidence and tools to succeed. The mentor must work with the hero to overcome their previous objections, which often takes the form of a not-so-gentle nudge. The mentor, for example, can be someone with the wisdom and experience to guide the hero, someone with technical expertise who can provide tools and specialized equipment, or someone who can train the hero to ready them physically and mentally. So, I'm trying to think of Star Wars as the example here, as where this comes in. This would probably come in between Call to Adventure and Head in the Sand, I'd say. So let's say meeting the mentor. And then I'm trying to structure this so that it could be easy for a AI to understand. So you could use this as a massive prompt to create your outlines. So I'm prefacing each of these bullet points with things that need to happen in this chapter. A mentor enters the protagonist's life. The mentor encourages the protagonist to take action and heed the call to adventure. The mentor gives the protagonist tools or information. Well, we'll say tools, training, information, or other forms of support that they will need to heed the call to adventure. Something like that. Okay. So that's good there, I think. Well, maybe I'll add the mentor gives the protagonist the first hint of their fatal flaw, but the protagonist either doesn't realize it or chooses to continue ignoring it. Fatal flaw is an important concept that we don't really see here. By the way, I am using Plotter here to kind of give me the information I need on each of these steps because they have a really good built-in documentation about each of these. This video is not sponsored by Plotter or anything, although it probably should be. It's not a bad program. It's not one that I use as much as I used to, because I generally just put everything on paper now. I don't really use the way Plotter works. I'll just put it all in a document. But all right, crossing the first threshold, which I believe is around here. I don't have much listed here in the first plot point, so maybe I could add some stuff here. The heroes gained or almost gained all the knowledge, confidence, and tools needed to begin the journey. However, their training and work with the mentor may be cut short due to the antagonist's actions or another external force, which pressures the hero out of the ordinary world and into the unknown world. So, yeah. This is a point of no return, which tests the hero and has them officially commit to the challenge before them. Often this is an abrupt moment with high stakes and tension. Yeah, so I think I have everything already in what I've got here. So we can just go ahead and move on now. Next up. Tests, allies, enemies. So I have enemies and allies here. The hero's first step into the unknown world produces a series of challenges which quickly test their new abilities. While the hero has new tools and confidence, they have not yet learned how to harness them. The dangers and enemies of this new world overwhelm the hero, leaving them in need of assistance by allies. The assistance of the allies. By the end of this section, the reader may doubt if the hero can succeed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have that in here somewhere. Between enemies and allies and games and trials, we definitely have something here. Opportunity to add more characters to the story. Yep, we got that here in enemies and allies. Plan the character development of supporting characters. So you might be wondering, like, why am I even doing this? Like, why am I putting this together? Well, I've kind of already mentioned it, but like, I want to have a good starting point thing that is scene by scene or chapter by chapter. So I know with every chapter, this is what should happen. Now, obviously, there are going to be exceptions, right? Like, this is a place to start from. But the thing I liked so much about the 24 chapter novel outline is it gave me exactly what should happen in each chapter. The only issue, I think, is that it's not quite fleshed out as much as it could be. It's still good as a simple novel, but I would like something a little more complex that includes a few more chapters in it. And so I'm doing that, and we'll go to beat 7 here. But I'm kind of doing it with the idea with AI in mind, right? I want to create something that I can feed to the AI that it will understand and be able to produce just like a perfect outline, right? Like maybe I'll even make a GPT of this down the road. But it could be a really fun exercise. And what I want to make it do is I want this to be modular, because this is sort of like the underlying outline, but something I've kind of discovered as I've been writing and studying stories is that every genre and every subgenre kind of has things about it, specific scenes that you need to hit for that particular genre. And so what I'm doing with this is kind of creating like the vanilla starter template. And then what I will eventually do, it'll probably take a long time to assemble a good library of these, but what I eventually want to do is create a modular system so that, say you're writing a heist novel and a heist has certain scenes that you need to hit. Well, then I'll have a list of those scenes that you can just kind of plug in to this basic template, which expands it a little bit, or maybe you combine some of the scenes, and then you're able to create the heist novel. Similarly, if you have, like, say you have a secondary character that needs a character arc. So this vanilla template does include a character arc in it, but it's for the main character. Like if you're following standard storytelling, you're going to include a main arc for the main character. But say you have a side character, let's say like Han Solo in the original Star Wars movie. He has a small but important character arc where he starts off as this, selfish smuggler just in it for himself. He just needs some money, to at the end coming in and saving Luke at the Death Star. And it's one of the best moments in the film, right? And that's because he has a small character arc that is very satisfying. Well, there's no place in all of the standard story structure outlines to put a secondary character's arc, because you don't know if you're going to have a secondary character or not. And so what I want to do is create a separate template, maybe 2 or 3 for like differing levels of side character arcs or subplots that include like an extra 3 scenes or something like that. So for Han Solo, we would have a scene where we get the statement of his flaw, which is that he's selfish. So we get an early scene of him, something demonstrating that he's selfish, right? Then we get a second scene where after all they've been through together, he still kind of is clinging on to his selfishness, where in before the launch on the Death Star, he's just like, I'm just going to take my money and run, right? And then the third scene where he gets over that hump and he comes in and saves Luke at the end. So that's an example of like a 3-scene character arc. So I would have a modular system where you can take those 3 scenes and plug them into this main story arc, and gives you 3 more scenes, or you can combine it with existing scenes, and then you have a more fleshed out side character. So that's the vision here for this whole thing. But I got to start with the basic underlying vanilla story structure. So that's what we're doing here. So back to it. Approach to the inmost cave. The hero and most allies have survived the previous tests and journey into the unknown world and can pause for a moment. If they have been hit by setbacks during the test, this is an opportunity for them to regroup and create their plan for the final confrontation by gathering tools, preparing plans, cutting down the enemy's ranks. It may also be a good place for a morale booster or a visit from the mentor to reconfirm the hero's faith in their abilities. By the end of this section, the hero should be entirely separated from the ordinary world and have survived an event that reconfirms their commitment to the quest. So I'm pretty sure we have something like that. Games and Trials has some of that. Earning Respect, where the hero has like a small victory and gains some respect. I think that all pretty much covers the approach to the inmost cave. I'd also call this like a first try fail cycle. Well, let me move on. We might need to come back to that one. The Ordeal. I think this would probably be considered the first pinch point right here, if I'm correct. Buzzkill, no, I'm not using Novel Crafter here. This is Plotter, and I'm only using Plotter because it's got really good documentation of the different story structures. So I'm just using it as a reference, but it doesn't have everything. For instance, it doesn't have Save the Cat, which so I'm just going to consult a blog post for that when we get to it. Same with the 17-step story structure. All right. Once the hero has entered the inmost cave, they must face their biggest test, which leads them to their darkest moment. The ordeal is a critical moment and a central conflict in the story. The hero must draw upon all they have learned and their new skills to be victorious in the face of a dangerous task. Often the hero faces a large sacrifice, a death, or significant loss, which breaks them down to their lowest. The hero must transition through a form of death and rebirth, transforming into a stronger, more powerful version of themselves. If the hero is successful, this rebirth grants them the strength to defeat the antagonist and new insights which alter their perception for the rest of the story, giving them the strength to fulfill their duties. If the hero fails, the journey's success is thrown into question while the tension and stakes heighten. So yeah, that would be this first pinch point here, which is a literal or non-literal battle. Yeah, pretty much got everything within that. And it reveals a big problem, a truth, an ultimatum, midpoint, all that's good. Reward, seizing the sword. I definitely have seizing the sword. That would be, where is it? Plan of attack, right here. Heroes have been broken down by the ordeal, but they have survived, meaning the reward is at hand. The reward is the item or knowledge the hero has been fighting for all along the journey. It is the key to the hero's ultimate success. Story has not yet reached its climax. Propels the hero on to the climax. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we have something quite like that. Oh no, here's seizing the sword. So yeah, I forget that this is really skipping ahead sometimes because there's only 12 steps. Um, yeah, okay, so we definitely do have this. All right. Whoop. Yeah. Road back. The hero aims to return to the ordinary world, but must face further dangers and the consequences of obtaining the reward. The road back sees an increase in tension and heightened stakes as the hero is pursued by danger, understands their mission is not yet complete, or uncovers an even more dire circumstance that must be dealt with before returning home. This moment serves as a catalyst for the hero to complete their mission and transitions them toward the final battle, forcing them across the threshold to ultimately lead them back to the ordinary world. That's all kind of in here, but it's sort of structured differently. Yeah, that's okay. We'll run with it because it is all kind of there. The resurrection. This is the true climax of the story, so that would probably be here: final battle or ultimate defeat. The final, most dangerous encounter. This is the definitive and greatest test of the hero's abilities and all they have learned along the journey. With the stakes heightened during the road back, the hero is not fighting for more than themselves. They are fighting to save others or perhaps the world. That's something I haven't really added in here. So I'm going to add a line here. But the hero is fighting to save others or perhaps the world. Heightening the stakes. All right. Return with the elixir. The hero returns home a changed person. This one I definitely have between bittersweet, sweet reflection, and death of self. We definitely have those here. All right. So Michael Bazo says, can you add Lester Dent too? So Lester Dent is for short fiction, and so wouldn't really apply to this particular. This is for a novel. But look at that. We're done with Plotter. So now we're going to take a look at the 17 steps, which if you're joining now, the 17 steps of the hero's journey is what Joseph Campbell originally put down. It was later simplified into 12 steps by Christopher Vogler, who wrote The Writer's Journey, which is a great book. You should check it out if you haven't seen it before. But there's 17 steps here, and some of them, like the first one is call to action, which was like the second or third one for Christopher Vogler. So there's a lot of difference here. So we'll run through these really quick as well, and then we'll get to save the cat. Plotter. All right. Max says, Good morning. Thanks, Jason. I'm a new writer and still learning how this all works. So this should be really helpful to you because I feel like a lot of new writers have no idea that there needs to be structure to a book. I think all of us sort of slightly intuitively understand structure because we've been consuming media that follows all of these structures our entire lives. But there's definitely a need for structure, which is why I'm putting this all together. So let's get into this. All right, call to action. I think we've pretty much covered that, but let's just read through it. Initial step, notice the departure, call to action, beckon to go on a journey. Yeah, that's fine. Refusal of the call, we got that. I'm pretty sure we got, okay, supernatural aid. Once the hero has committed themselves to embarking on whatever that quest may be, keep in mind a hero's journey can apply to a modern emotional story as well. They receive supernatural aid. Individuals give the hero information or tools at the start of their journey to help their chances of completing the task. Okay, so this we kind of covered in meeting the mentor. Which I'm just realizing I don't think he has a meeting the mentor step. But he does have this step here. Individuals give the hero information or tools at the start of their journey to help the chances of completing the task. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it definitely wasn't built alone. Every hero has a set of allies. So, okay, I'm thinking the mentor doesn't have to be a person, which doesn't have to be a person, but could also come in the form of crucial information, supernatural aid, so we get that in there, etc. All right, crossing the threshold, we've definitely got that in here. Okay, belly of the whale. The first point of real danger in the hero's journey, taken from the biblical story of Jonah and the whale. Hero must take a decision to continue. Yeah, I think that'd be around here, the first plot point or the first pinch point. The Road of Trials is a set of 3 tests that the hero must take. Usually they will fail at least one of these tests. This could be a montage. It could also be a series of obstacles leading to a smaller goal in the journey. Here's where the hero learns to use his or her tools and allies while on their way to meeting the goddess. Interesting. Okay, so a set of 3 tests, huh? So that would probably go here under games and trials. Yeah. So I'm going to add something here. Protagonist undergoes at least 2, we'll say, I might need to split this into 2 chapters, but we're going to say undergoes 2 trials and fails. Could be a montage. Yeah, I think this could maybe be 2 chapters, this games and trials, where one chapter is one trial and the second chapter is the second trial, failing both times, and you also get some of this other stuff sprinkled throughout the 2 chapters. But then on the third trial, say with the third trial, the protagonist succeeds. Yeah, that's all fine. And we get a sense that they're earning respect. Okay, and then we're going to meet the goddess. At this point in the monomyth, our hero needs a break to adjust perspective and digest the ways they've changed. It's here that they meet with an advisor or a trusted individual who will help them gain a better insight into the next steps of the journey. Frodo met with Galadriel. Luke met Leia. This is the point where I'm like, I'm not sure how this fits with what we've got. So we have this first pinch point where the hero is humbled. Because all of this stuff here, meeting with the goddess, the temptation, the atonement with the father, feels like further down here with the midpoint. Let's read a little bit more here. Much like the road of trials and temptation is the test in the hero's journey, it presents a set of temptations that our hero must either overcome or avoid. These temptations pick and pull at the insecurities of the hero. A microcosm can be found in our own everyday lives with the simple act of getting out of bed. The temptation to stay in the cozy confines of our comforters and comfort zones can be strong and sometimes overwhelming. This must be manifested in our story with some kind of a cheap way out. Okay, that makes sense to me. And then let's read the atonement with the father. Once they've thrown away their temptation, the hero enters the atonement with the father. This is always an emotional part of the story. It's a point in the monomyth where our protagonist must confront an aspect of their character from Act 1 that has been slowing them down. Okay, that's the fatal flaw. Something that could be fatal to their journey in the coming climactic stages. While this is actuated as a confrontation with a male entity, it doesn't have to be. The point here is that the hero finds themselves within themselves a change from who they were into someone more capable. Harry has to reconcile with the loss of his father figure Dumbledore, now take on Voldemort alone, just like Luke. Okay, so that all makes sense. There's definitely elements of that here between the first pinch point, problem revealed, truth and ultimatum, and midpoint. The midpoint is a highly reflective time. Figuratively look at themselves in a mirror, confront who they are, and contemplate what they need to change to become the person they need to be to succeed at their goal. Which kind of sounds like the atonement with the father section. And then truth and ultimatum, we have the protagonist learns critical new information. Here we go. Yeah. With this more complete information, the protagonist must decide whether or not to continue all in for the remainder of the story. That's this temptation here. Causes them to second guess their decisions. I'm going to add the protagonist considers trying to find a way out to get back to the ordinary world, just so that's a little more clear. And then going back to meeting the goddess, which doesn't have to be a woman, obviously, just figuratively meeting the goddess here. An advisor, trusted individual. Yeah, that's kind of here. Or the information might come in the form of meeting the goddess, as in a trusted advisor or other individual. All right, something like that. Okay. Warning, low battery says, I find the book I'm working on takes more time than children's books. I'm not sure what type of book you're writing, but generally speaking, books like, full novels definitely do take a lot more work than children's books. Uh, Although I guess it depends on what children's book author you're talking to. All right, let me finish this and I'll get to questions. So, Atonement with the Father, we kind of got Apotheosis. With a new sense of confidence and clarity, we must take on the hero. We must then make our hero deal with apotheosis. This is a stage of the hero's journey where a greater perspective is achieved, often embodied by a death of the hero's former self, where the old Frodo has died and the new one is born. This is sometimes interpreted as a more aha moment, a breakthrough that leads to the narrative climax. We definitely have that here around the midpoint in the plan of attack. The ultimate boon. This monomyth step is the physical climax of the story. This is often considered the MacGuffin of a film, the physical objects that drives our hero's motivation. But it's a MacGuffin, to use Hitchcock's famous term, but because ultimately it doesn't matter. This is kind of talking like we're moving on ahead here to let's see. Well, let's skip that for now and come back to it. Refusal of Return. Upon a successful completion of the hero's journey and a transformation into a different person, the hero has a refusal to return. This is interesting. This is the beginning of the third act. I'm not sure I really know how that fits. Let's skip it. This is the point in the hero's journey where they must get out alive, often requiring the help of individuals they met along the way. Dorothy still has to get back to Kansas, the solution for which may seem like a leap of faith. Is that the second pitch point? Like, all of these sort of exist in one way or another, but it's not like quite so picture perfect. But I'm also not sure where's a better place to put it. Crossing the return threshold. So a lot of these last steps here are like after the climax. So because the ultimate boon and the refusal of return, this sounds like stuff that goes at the end. I can see why Christopher Vogler simplified these a little bit, because Joseph Campbell wasn't thinking from here's how you tell stories kind of way. He was thinking more of a academic, let's describe what a lot of these stories are doing. Crossing the return threshold and Master of Two Worlds. Yeah, we've got all that. Freedom to live. Hero's journey is about death and rebirth. Yep. So we do have kind of good example of all of those. So some of those are a little muddled for me, but also like they're kind of here, just in different ways. So I'm just gonna call it. I think we got it. Because things like Apotheosis exist in like throughout the climax, and same with the ultimate boon. Refusal of Return is interesting to me. I can't actually think of a actual good example. Like they say, the Shire seems so boring now, and the last thing Harry wants to do is go back to that drawer under the stairs. Like, yeah, I understand that, but that's just like, that wouldn't be a chapter. That'd just be a moment, right? So I'm not really sure how to quantify that. We're not going to make that a whole scene. So yeah, we're going to call that for that. All right. So let me go through a couple of these questions. So you says, oh, just gave you a peek under the hood there. Every time you share something, I'm giving you my email address again. I'm subscribed to your newsletter since its launch. I know why, but every time. So you shouldn't be able to. So when you subscribe to my email, you should get an email with the link to the Google Doc that that has all my prompts in it. And I would just bookmark that Google Doc, because you don't need to subscribe to my email list more than once. Once you're on there, you're on there. And I'll admit I haven't done the best of job of regularly emailing out to that list yet. Part of that's just because I'm working 2 jobs here and just do not like everything that I do it because I just got the time. But that's going to be changing soon in the next couple of weeks where I'll have more time. But you do not need to subscribe more than once. It's all there. Just find the Google Doc and bookmark it. And I constantly update it with new prompts and things, so you'll be able to see that. Steve says, bit off topic, but I adapted your super prompt from Claude 2.0, so it asks you for a beat, then writes the content, then asks for another beat until the chapter is done. Now into my second book. That's a great way to do it. If you want to go beat by beat, I would definitely recommend something like that. Right now, if I'm going beat by beat, I think I'm preferring to recommend Novel Crafter, because it's sort of set up to facilitate the whole beat by beat writing. I do think it's pretty good for that type of writing. What is the article? Jeff said, what is the article you're on so you can follow along? So this one, I just literally just did a Google search for 17 steps of the hero's journey, and we got a result from Studio Binder. But I'm about to, in fact, I'm just going to click out of this. We're going to move on now to Save the Cat. And this is a Save the Cat beat sheet article that, hey, yours truly wrote for Kindlepreneur, because I work there. So this is the article that I put together a while back about the Save the Cat story structure. And we're going to be going beat by beat through this and making sure we're covering this in our everything novel, as I think somebody's described it. Yeah, Gav Asia Robinson says the everything novel. That's a fine name for now. It's not exact. I want to call it like story module or something like that, because I really like the idea of it being modular, so you can just stick in other small character arcs or things like that, like Legos, you know. But Daniela says, I found Novel Crafter thanks to you. I'm using it to organize myself visually. I'm writing a visual novel to make a game in Unreal Engine. Oh, interesting. So basically I'm doing a screenplay. That is so cool. So I actually literally downloaded Unreal Engine like a couple of days ago because I really want to start learning it and playing around with it. Unreal Engine, if for those who don't know, is a game production studio. It's a way to make video games, but it's becoming more and more common to use it for something called virtual production, which kind of the big budget example of what virtual production is. It's what they did on The Mandalorian, where they basically had a 360 screen and they would put the actors in the middle in a little set. And depending on where the camera is, the background would actually move, so you get that parallax effect where you're actually able to kind of move within the environment. And that is possible, the ability to move in 3D space like that, because of, I think it's usually Unreal Engine. I'm not sure if Unreal Engine is what they actually used on The Mandalorian, but I think it might be. Certainly something similar to that. And then a lot of indie studios are popping up that have maybe not a full 360 degree screen like they had for The Mandalorian, but they'll have like one screen on that's maybe curved to get a 180 or near 180 different viewpoints, and it makes certain high budget things much cheaper. And I actually think it's the future of indie filmmaking, and we're going to be able to see much more high budget looking films in the future because of virtual production and things like Unreal Engine. So sorry, I'm geeking out about that a little bit, but that's actually kind of where I see my business going right now. It's all about AI and writing books. But I think eventually people are going to be able to have, the people that are successful in creating IPs will be able to have a small production team that could include something like a virtual production studio. But it doesn't even need to be that complex. It could be like, imagine you're using Unreal Engine and you use it to create an environment that's part of your story. So say it's like an open world video game. You create an open world that's like part of your world, right? And then you can make a video game out of that so people can go and explore this world. Where then you could take the exact same assets, the same world, and create an animated movie out of it. Because animation is another thing that people are using Unreal Engine for. It's not really what it was built for, but it's what people are using for it. And then you could also use it as a background in a live action virtual production situation like The Mandalorian, which is really cool. So like with one software, Unreal Engine, as long as you got the hardware for all of the other things, you could potentially do video game, animated film, and live action film or television, all within a very small team. And then once these tools start to incorporate AI, it's going to be even faster and easier. And it's just like, possibilities are so endless and cool. So I would love to see something like that eventually. Sorry for the tangent there, but that's something I'm really excited about. Okay. So Chris Wildfire says, what about combining inner and outer hero's journey and hero's journey in your character art outline? So this outline here, I started with the foundation of the 24 chapter novel outline, which does a good job of tracking every part of the protagonist's character arc. Pretty much every major story structure outline out there has a character arc for the protagonist. If you want secondary character arcs, you're going to need to add those in. And it will depend on how many secondary characters you have that you want to arc for. I don't know if that answers your question. I know Christopher Vogler did work with another guy named Michael Haig, who wrote a book, or they had not a book, it's a presentation called The Hero's Two Journeys, one of which is like the external goal, and one of which is the internal goal. And that's kind of accounted for here with everything about the character's fatal flaw and everything. Debbie says Campbell was describing mythology. That's correct. But we're not just talking Lord of the Rings and Star Wars as mythical. Like pretty much every romance, every thriller also follows a lot of the same things. They're just using different terminology than things like goddess and all of that. Jeff says, are you going to release this doc for us? Eventually, yes. But it may be a while because I want to sort of fine tune it a little bit and get some of those modular ideas down as well. Because there's a ton of different genres and stuff that I'd like to be able to make this, to make compatible things with it. So yes, and it'll probably go to the people in my membership first. But eventually, I'm actually probably what's going to happen is this is going to become a book, and people will be able to buy the book because I have a lot more planned for what this would look like. That really I'm going to need a full book to flesh the whole thing out. All right, let's move on to Save the Cat. So if you're not familiar, Save the Cat was originally written it was written by Blake Snider, who designed this structure for screenplays, but it has since been picked up pretty widely by novelists as well. And there's even a book written by Jessica Brody, I assume in collaboration with Blake Snider's company, which Blake Snider is actually no longer with us, but his foundation or his company, I don't know, is still putting out books. And Jessica Brody put out a book called Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which is basically just adapting everything from Save the Cat into showing you how you can do it in novel form. She just came out with another one that was Save the Cat Writes a YA novel, which is kind of exactly what it sounds like. So there's 15 beats that Blake Snider has, and some of these are definitely unique and different from the ones we've got so far. And so I'm going to be spending some time on this one to make sure we've got everything. Particularly things like the opening image. I think this, the way they describe this is even if you're writing a novel and you're not writing a scene from like a movie, this should be an image. So there's like a moment. Imagine slicing a moment in time and spending a good amount of time just describing that could actually make a really good hook if you have a good image. So let's just read this. This is a single establishing scene or paragraph that should visually tell the viewers or readers as much as possible about the main character. Think of it as a before snapshot of who your protagonist was before the unfolding of this story. This scene can be an actual photo or a very short clip, or even an animation explaining your protagonist's world in that a picture is worth 1,000 words way. Obviously, we're not doing an animation for a novel, but there's two things I want to put here. And this is me adding a little bit of my own experience in here as well, but I'm pretty sure that so here in The Really Bad Day, we'll say we get introduced to the protagonist and the ordinary world they live in. This should be done through an opening image that visually represents and tells the viewer, the readers, as much as possible about the main character. Yeah. That's fine, probably. I don't think we necessarily need to make that a full scene. It can be the beginning of the scene. But I'm going to actually add something in the prologue because I think, and this might just be me, but I think when prologues are used, and I'm going to make this optional, they're using an opening image technique as well, but it's not for the hero. It's about the world and the central conflict of the story, and possibly even a opening image of the villain. Starts with an opening image that visually represents the central conflict of the story and or the antagonist. Should set the tone for the genre and uh, conflict level of the story. Um, a lot of books that use prologues, they're more common in fantasy and sci-fi. Um, they're doing it well, and sometimes people have a prologue, but it's called chapter one. It's not called a prologue because it's a moment before we actually get to the protagonist. So you'll see this a lot in like mystery thriller, where you have the crime is the first scene. The first scene is the crime, whatever the crime happens, but we haven't gotten to the main character yet. That's a prologue, whether it's called a prologue or not, because it sets the tone. It establishes what the central conflict is. And that's really the role that a prologue has. Because often when we get to the first time we meet the hero, the tone is not so serious yet. It's particularly true in fantasy because often you have that trope of like starting as the farm boy, right? And being a farm boy is really boring and you don't see a whole lot of the world around them. Whereas in a fantasy story, there's usually lots of conflict going on elsewhere in the world. There's magic, there's monsters, there's armies, there's all kinds of things that are happening completely unbeknownst to the main character. And so the prologue is a good example of sort of establishing the epic scope of the fantasy, so that so that we're not like bored or we get the wrong idea when we get into the first chapter with the main character. So the prologue kind of gives us the promise that yes, this is an epic fantasy or whatever genre it is, a mystery thriller, and we're gonna get to that. Here's a little teaser, but now we're gonna go to the main character and explore them in their ordinary world, and that's the prologue. I have also found, I'm going to put this at the very end, one of the things that Blake Snider says about the opening image is that it should be completely different from the closing image. The last one is the closing image. And the reason for that is to visually represent how the main character has changed over the course of the story. So there's an opening image to kind of represent what the character looks like at the beginning, and the closing image to see what the character looks like at the end. And you should get a visual idea of how that person has changed from just those two images. I think that the same is true as the prologue and what I'm calling the after credit scene, which I often just use the epilogue for my after credit scene, but I'm using the term after credit scene just as a nod to Marvel, because they are the ones that sort of mastered this, is giving a hint, and this is going to be an optional scene too, just like the prologue, is to give a hint that there's a bigger world out there, a bigger threat, and this acts as the closing image for the world and the conflict, not the closing image for the protagonist. So let's just should involve a closing image visually representing the upcoming conflict for future books, series, and in a way that increases the stakes, similar to a Marvel after credit scene that teases upcoming films. Something like that. Okay, yeah, that's good. So I'm just adding that. This is sort of my own addition. I just sort of started doing it naturally myself, and then I realized this is actually really cool. And then I heard some other people talk about storytelling, about how you should have something at the end that's just like a little bit of extra. And they equated it to the Marvel after credit scene, and I'm just like, oh, I've been doing that. I didn't even realize I was doing that, but I was doing that. So I'm adding that to my special everything novel outline. I'm gonna find a definitive name for it. But yeah. All right, theme stated. In the first 5% of the story, the theme of the hero's story arc is established. Examples of story arc themes are all of these things. This theme can also be referred to as the protagonist's life lesson. For instance, the myth of Icarus is about a man who wants to fly. The story arc details his attempts to do so by creating himself wings from wax and feathers. The life lesson presented is how too much ambition, flying too high, leads to a fall from grace. At the climax of the story, Icarus flies. Okay, so that's the theme. This sounds to me like the fatal flaw and what the character needs as opposed to what the character wants, which is everything that is established in these first two chapters. So we kind of have this. Interesting that there's a list of these, though. Huh. All right, setup. Beat 3 delves deeper into the protagonist's life, revealing other characters who may be friends, enemies, or a situation that must be addressed. Their character may need to leave a toxic job, address a health problem, or take steps to better one's life. These scenes can also reveal a character's tragic flaw, how he or she self-sabotages or has misguided expectations about the future. That sounds like the grasping at straws section. Actually, just about perfectly. At the 10% of this story, the main character is catapulted into a crisis through a breakup, divorce, death, or invitation. This is a life-changing event called an inciting incident. Boom, right here. We got that. The debate. The debate occurs at beat 5. It's usually an internal one where the character wonders, where should I go? What should I do next? Sometimes this scene includes a friend with good advice that is resisted by the protagonist, which sounds exactly like everything we've put together here in the call to adventure and the head in the sand and meeting the mentor. So that's good. We got that. Break into 2. Story beat 6 is the point where the protagonist must rise to meet a challenge, or there could be a catastrophe. This also marks the start of Act 2, which I believe is right here. Pull out the rug, first plot point. Okay, here's one where we might need to add something. During the first, the B story, so beat 7. During the first half of Act 2, the main character usually meets a helper on their journey. So we have enemies and allies here. This character can be a love interest, rival, new friend, or guru. The ultimate purpose of this new character is to assist the hero on their life journey. I guess we kind of have that. I wouldn't call it a B story. Just sort of like a part of the A story. But I guess this is sort of a side chapter where, yes, it's related to the main story, but it's kind of on its own too. All right, fun and games. Beat 8 is a long sequence of several scenes that show how the main character's second act works differently from the one introduced in the first act. This act will either show the character floundering or succeeding as they seek to meet their goal, depending on the story arc that you have chosen. Story beat 8 also refers to the promise of the premise that may have been described on the back of the book jacket or in the tagline of the movie. For instance, in Jaws, the promise of the premise is that someone will be eaten by the shark. Okay, this is good. Promise of the premise. We should put that in here somewhere. Actually, okay, so this is one of those chapters that I was thinking maybe there's a lot in here. We should split this into 2 chapters. I'm gonna do that. So, and this is called Games and Trials. This one's called Fun and Games. So I think we're definitely at the right point here. But I like this promise of the premise thing. So let's see what we got here in the Games and Trial. Games and Trials. Some of the most interesting and exciting things the New World has to offer are presented. The protagonist gets to explore the New World and learn how to navigate it. There's lingering friction with side characters such as love interest. There's some form of training or learning required for the protagonist to harness their new abilities in the new role. All right, and then we're going to add The protagonist undergoes one trial and fails. The protagonist should experience a lot of frustration and self-doubt. Well, we'll get to that. Put this here. This could be another glimpse of the protagonist's flaws, keeping them from fully achieving what they need. All right, and then we're going to enter a new chapter. And we'll call it No More Games. Things that need to happen in this chapter. The protagonist makes a second attempt at overcoming a trial and fails again. This time, the cost of the failure is more pronounced. The protagonist should experience a lot of frustration and self-doubt. This here should be up here. And this. All right. Let's see. Meanwhile, this is the moment when the promise of the premise takes place. Usually with the antagonist succeeding. Well, hang on. No. Because this should actually be here in the first pinch point, I think. So, it's hard to say. Like, a lot of these people are a lot smarter than I am, and I get a lot of doubt about what where we should put stuff. So I think this promise with the premise thing should actually go here in the first pinch point, because this is the first real conflict with the antagonist. This is the section where we get the promise of the premise that may be described in the book description or tagline. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, and then we get to the midpoint. Beat 9 marks the middle point of the story's narrative, where the hero encounters either a false victory or a false defeat. False victory is when the lead character thinks they are getting everything that they want, but something reveals that this may not necessarily be true. It could be that the victory leads to even more unhappiness. Often the reveal at the midpoint shows that what we think we want is not the best for us. A false defeat is the moment that somehow resonates with failure. The character hits some sort of rock bottom. From the perspective of the protagonist, there is nowhere to go but up. In this type of story arc, the main character must conquer himself in some way, and often this propels the midpoint into a counter narrative that has a happy ending. That definitely sounds like the midpoint right here. Bad guys close in. The 10th story beat is where the bad guys close in on the protagonist, leading to a catastrophic conclusion. There are sometimes characters that gang up on the protagonist or villains that send the story arc into a downward spiral. Sometimes these are internal bad guys sabotaging the lead character from making the right decisions. At this point in the story, it may be too late for the character to do what is right. So that sounds like the second pinch point. But the interesting thing about this is you get the sense from, especially from the title bad guys close in, that the antagonist is being proactive here. And the second pinch point, as I understand it, is where the protagonist meets the antagonist. Like, they've had the plan of attack. Like, they're getting ready. Okay, so, okay. I actually think... Well, I'm going to read through this and see if there's a better way to do this. Beat 11 is the point in the novel or film where something dies. It could be literal death, the protagonist's old life, or just the death of the old self. This scene usually merges seamlessly into Beat 12, the Dark Night of the Soul. That sounds like surprise failure. Oh, I'm thinking I'm further ahead than we really are. Because this is where the final battle happens. Okay, so one thing I am going to put here for the second pinch point, often instigated by the antagonist. And not, let's say, taking the protagonist by surprise. Then we get the surprise failure. The antagonist defeats the protagonist forces. Shocking revelation. Giving up. So this is the Dark Night of the Soul right here. Giving up. Well, it's a combination of giving up and the pep talk. Seizing the sword. Break into 3. At beat 13, the protagonist experiences some kind of epiphany where they finally realize what it is that they must do to fix their problematic situation. They are reborn as a more improved version of themselves. That's like Joseph Campbell's resurrection, right? This is also the point where we enter Act 3. In some story arcs, the protagonist may realize their flaws, but it may be too late, setting the audience up for a tragic ending. Okay. Well, this isn't really meant for tragedies here. So, seizing the sword. Final battle. Ultimate defeat. Yeah, that's the break into 3 here. The final battle. The finale. In the finale, the hero's world is transformed. In happier stories, bad guys are destroyed. People reunited and all is not lost after all. In sadder story arcs, the demons within win and the character meets the worst possible and often the most ironic fate. Ultimate defeat. Ultimate victory. Yeah, I guess I should say that this story structure that I'm putting together is for a happy ending type of thing. It would be slightly different if we were going for a sad ending. Bittersweet Reflection, which would be kind of the final image. B50 mirrors the cinematic image. We get a final visual image similar to the opening image, but demonstrating visually how much and in what way the protagonist has changed. Cool. All right. I think that's good. I actually had more of the save the cat thing than I thought I would. So that's good. It's all pretty much in there in one way or another. All right. Atomic Elf says, oh, wait. First, Beautiful Badassery says, I subscribe, but I am not sure if I got the link to the Google Docs. Was it within the first email received after I subscribed? Yes, it should have been inside of that first email. I'll send out another email to everybody pretty soon with some information in there. I'm preparing a video right now about how to write a book description. You'll see that fairly soon. And for that one, I'm going to put some new prompts in the Google Doc, and I'll just email everybody else to mention that it's there. Atomic Elf says, does using wording like the protagonist should experience rather than the protagonist experiences matter when it comes to the AI interpreting events? Will it think these events should be happening? I don't think so. I obviously haven't tested that, but I often use the wording like this should happen here when speaking to the AI, because yeah, I mean, I've never had any issue with that. I think of the AI as a writing assistant. Like if I had a junior intern working for me, and so I give it instructions like I would give instructions to a real person. So, yeah. Okay. So, and then a couple of comments about the Dark Night of the Soul and all of that. Yeah. Pretty much got all of that here. Which I wonder how many of these I've got now. Fair amount. Probably around 30, 31-ish. So, I honestly thought it was going to take the full 2 hours to get to Save the Cat. And we're not there yet. So, let's, if you want me to keep going with some other options, we can do that. I'm going to pull up Plotter. Or we can just call it for now. You let me know in the chat if what you want to do there. One of the ones I want to look at, this one will take me a while to fully get through, is the Story Engines Blueprint, which I believe comes from a book called Story Engineering, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But like if you go in Plotter has all of these different templates over here. Some of them are genre specific, like Cozy Mystery here. There's some romance beat sheet. Whoa. Romancing the Beat. We have like 7 plot point structure, which that one I know we've definitely hit everything that's in there. We have the story circle, which is an even more simplified version of the hero's journey. Story spine, also a very simplified version. There's Take Off Your Pants, which is a great book that The title refers to becoming used to the idea of outlining. I don't think you necessarily need to be an outliner, but I do think that you need to understand structure so that you can constantly be working towards the next step in the structure. You don't have to plan it out ahead of time how that's going to look like, but that's what I would do. And then Villain's Journey, I'm not sure about that. I don't know what W plot is. So I'll definitely go through some of these. Some of them I'll ignore, like I don't need mystery or action adventure, children's book plot. Those aren't relevant. Fichtean Curve is a highly simplified version of everything. Same with Freytag's Pyramid. I don't know what haiku is. Interesting. Horror isn't necessary. In media res is interesting. It's not really a story structure per se, as it is like starting in the middle of a story, and it's like if you guys have seen Batman Begins, that film does not start at the beginning of Batman's journey. It starts when he's like in prison, and you're like, how did he get here? And then but that's the lowest part of his story, so that's why the story starts there. And then you get flashbacks showing how he got there. That's kind of what in media res is. Or Star Wars, where it starts immediately into the action with no exposition. You just kind of get dropped in with C-3PO and R2-D2 and have to sort of learn what's going on through their eyes. That's kind of what in media res is. Larry Brooks short story, Lester Dent master plot formula, which I use for short stories. Limerick. So there's a lot of good templates here. I'm just gonna go ahead and take a look at the Story Engine's blueprint, which, let's cancel this. I already have one ready. Because this is one that is a 40 scene novel, which is closer to what I think it should be, rather than 24 or 25, which you get with the 24 chapter novel outline. This one is actually split up into scenes. That's another thing I should mention, actually. So an interesting thing about scenes, chapter. Oh man, my brain is so shot right now. Sorry, guys. One of the things that I think is important, a lot of authors will disagree with me, but if you want to write best-selling fiction, I think you need to have short chapters. One author who wouldn't disagree with me on that is James Patterson, because that's what he recommends. He will make every chapter very short so that readers feel like they're flying through the book and they have to keep going. That's why I think you should generally have no more than one scene per book or per chapter, and that scene should be probably 2,000 words or less. So that's why I like the idea of a 40 chapter novel instead of a 24 chapter novel, because it would basically allow you to split up those scenes a little bit more, so you can make them faster, and then you can get a good 80,000 word novel, which is much more in where the average novel should be, as opposed to 50,000 words with the 24 chapter novel outline. So that's a little thought on that. Realism Jared said, how do you write a romance story with both the male and the female leads as protagonists? How do the scenes and beats work in this scenario? So here's a pro tip. And you can go read Save the Cat. It talks about this too. There is only one protagonist, and there should only ever be one protagonist. You can have two characters that you're sharing their viewpoints, where you go back and forth between their viewpoints, but you can only have one central protagonist. If you add a secondary character, then you're going to have to structure a separate story arc for that character and layer it in. Okay? But the story structure for that person will be different than what you would do for the protagonist. That's why I'm trying to develop this modular system, because the main story structure, the one I'm building right now, is going to be the main story structure for the overall plot as well as the protagonist's character arc. Then if you wanted to add a important secondary character, which would be your love interest in this case, that person would have a different arc that would be similar but probably not as fleshed out as the main protagonist, and you'd put that together, layer it together so that it works. And that's an important thing there. Only one protagonist. You look at even ensemble films. The one that comes to mind right now is the first Avengers movie. One of the best movies I've ever seen in terms of balancing multiple plot points, right? And multiple characters. And what happened in that movie, you do have multiple characters. Every single one of them has an arc. Every single one of the main characters in Avengers has an arc. But there is only one main character, and I wonder if any of you can guess who the main character of the first Avengers movie was. I'll let that simmer for a little bit while I start getting things ready here, and let me know in the comments who the main characters of the first Avengers movie was, because there is one. There is one protagonist of the first Avengers movie. There's plenty of other characters, and those characters have character arcs, but there's only one protagonist. So that's kind of fun to go and analyze ensemble films like that, where you realize it's actually not an ensemble. There's several characters there. Yeah, realism, Jared, got it. It's Iron Man. Iron Man was the Avengers movie was basically the third Iron Man movie. Yeah, it was not, you had other characters, but Iron Man was the one that went through the full emotional arc, where they gave up their fatal flaw at the end to sacrifice himself at the very end. And that's basically what the protagonist does, is they're the ones with the fatal flaw that they have to give up in order to succeed at the end. Other people have arcs too, but an arc is simply a change. Han Solo had an arc, even though he didn't go through everything that a protagonist does. He still changed. He was a different person by the end of the first Star Wars movie than he was at the beginning. All right. So let's start going through these, and we're not going to get through all of them, but we'll go through a few more, and we'll go until 12 o'clock Eastern time. And so I'm not as familiar with this particular story structure. This will be all kind of new to me. And I probably should have started with this one, honestly. So I had 40 chapters to be working with, because I'm probably going to have to split a couple of the chapters that I've developed here to make them work in this kind of a format. But I like the idea of 40 chapters instead of 24. So we're going to go through that. All right. Beginning of Act 1. Prep phase, scene 1. Some of this is about the preparation phase. The preparation phase gets the story off to a proper start by introducing the characters, the setting, and the stakes. It introduces the reader to the hero and lets them glimpse what life is like for that individual prior to the events that sent things spiraling out of the ordinary. Doing so allows the reader to connect with the protagonist, to care about them before the writer throws them both to the wolves. The more the reader cares about the protagonist, their wants and goals, dreams and desires, trials and tribulations before the arrival of the central conflict of the story, the more they will care about what happens to them after that conflict appears. So that's for Act 1, not necessarily for this scene. And this is about the story engine framework, which isn't quite what we're looking at either. Well, let's read it because I'm not so familiar with it. The story engine's process uses a 4-act or 4-phase structure designed to heighten the emotional connection between the reader and the protagonist of the story. Each act exists for a specific reason and pushes the story forward in different but equally important ways. Their positions in the story are as important as their content. Put the wrong act in the wrong place and you'll destroy that emotional connection you're working so hard to build. Each act is tied to the next through a critical transition scene known as a game-changing moment. We got a couple of those. Each game-changing moment moves the protagonist forward through the revelation of key information which they need to reach their story goal and put them into a new emotional stance that is represented by the action that follows. 7 elements, 4 acts, and 3 game-changing moments form the base structure of your story. This actually sounds a little similar to the 24-chapter novel outline. It's also split into 4 chunks with a couple of game-changing moments. The preparation phase makes up approximately the first 20% of the story. Note that this template is set up as a 40-chapter story based around 80k word manuscripts with 40 scenes and 2k words each. Each chapter also happens to be only one single scene in length. This model can be used to shrink or expand the number of chapters or scenes as needed. This works so long as the proper ratios for each phase are 20%, 30%, 30%, and 20%, which is about right. I'd say a lot of authors would probably say it should be 25% for each. That's what the 24-chapter novel outline looks like. It's 6 chapters for each. That's 25% each. You can rearrange this template as needed to fit whatever length you need. Okay, so that's like the whole phase. Not really what scene 1 is about. What's scene 2 say? Continue introducing the protagonist to your readers. Be sure to include details about their daily life as well as their needs and internal and external goals. Identifying those personal flaws that they struggle against will also help you plan out their character growth as the story progresses. Remember, this is all leading up to the first game-changing moment. Okay, so we add okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to sort of figure this out. Woodgrain TV set asks, what program are you using for that outline? This here is Plotter. And it's that's spelled Plottr. And it's a pretty good program. I actually think I do have an affiliate link for it, but I wasn't really planning on promoting it because I don't use it very often, and I typically promote only the ones that I use frequently. But I obviously own it, and I'm using it now. And I think if I were more likely to use this sort of style to outline, I would probably use it a lot more. But typically, I just outline just on a sheet of paper. I don't really need anything more complex than that. So Debbie says chapter 1 should be an inciting incident. An inciting incident should be is the key word there, because it is not the inciting incident. It can be. If you read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, the very first line of that book pretty much is the inciting incident. And you do want your inciting incident to be early on, but typically the inciting incident doesn't come until around the 20 to 25% mark, the main one. But you do have, like this says, a really bad day, right? The really bad day is, something is happening, something is changing. And I don't really want to. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish chapters here before we get to this is all kind of part of the inciting incident right here. I don't want to expand that too much, but I guess we could have like 8 or so. Where does he? Okay, here's his game-changing moment. This sounds like something else. I might have to really spend some time on this. I'm not sure I can really get to this so much right now, because this is going to take some while to really sort out. So what I think I'll do is if any of you have any additional questions, and that could be about this or anything else, AI related, storytelling related, go ahead and put them in the chat right now, and I'll answer them for the next 20 minutes or so. Or, if there isn't much, then I will go ahead and close out for the day. Thank you all for being here. Lots of cool things coming. I just had an idea today Yeah, I try every morning to go on a walk because I always have my best ideas while I'm out on a walk. And this morning I had a doozy, and it's going to be awesome. And hopefully I can prepare it in the next couple of weeks to fit with some of my other plans. Um, so yeah, so that's some fun stuff. As far as those of you that are wondering about my membership, that will be opening again fairly soon. I'm not going to say when exactly because I don't know the exact day, but definitely that's going to be happening here in the near future. So keep an eye out for that. And as part of that whole membership, one of the things they're going to start doing here in February is we're going to start doing some challenges. Because my main goal for my membership and everything around it is to get people to take action, right? So I want people to write books and to actually get going and take action and finish, and not obsess over making it perfect or anything, just finishing. And so we're going to be designing a challenge around that, and that'll be starting in February. So I guess there's a little bit of a teaser of when I'll be opening up the membership open again to the public. It'll be around the same time. I just don't know the exact day yet. So you'll be able to join in on those challenges. And then at some point, probably not in February, but March, April-ish, I'm going to be putting together some kind of advanced membership that involves a lot of personal group coaching with me. So if you have questions, if you have things that you're struggling with, you can come and ask those questions to me. That'll be probably a little bit more than the main membership that I have because it involves a lot more of my time. But that option will be available as well. And those are some of my plans right now. And Realism Jared says this channel is very educational. Thank you for the great content. Well, thank you, Realism Jared. I'm glad you like it. I'm trying my best to get the best stuff out there. And I, run a lot of experiments. You'll see the video that goes up on Friday of this week is going to be a little different. I hired a much more expensive editor. Much more expensive than myself because I've traditionally done all of the editing, but I do all of my editing very just like minimal. I try to do as little as I can. And so we're just going to see how that goes. You can let me know what you think of that video when it launches on Friday. Steve says, I'd like to learn about marketing. If you could accommodate it. Yes, I'm hoping to do a little bit more information on marketing and self-publishing and all of that. We'll see. I'm going through a program right now on optimizing my YouTube channel and getting it to the best that it can be. And because one of the things I'm worried about is with YouTube's algorithm is it going to let me deviate too far from the AI topics? Like, am I forced into AI being the only thing that I talk about for the rest of eternity? And would I have to start a new channel if I wanted to talk about marketing or storytelling or other things? I don't think that'll be the case. But at the very least, tomorrow I'm going to be filming a video. It won't be released until next week, but I'll be filming a video about book descriptions, which is an important aspect of marketing because it's a piece of copywriting. And so that'll be coming out and showing you how you can use AI in a couple of different methods to create great book descriptions. I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. Leapoy says, I want to build a fantasy trilogy with an academic theme story. So like an academy. Academy fiction tends to be urban fantasy for the most part. So I'm not sure if that's what your plan is or if you plan on it being more like a medieval time frame. There's both, but they're two different subgenres. So I would look into a couple of different books in those, whichever genre it is, and get familiar with how they do things. Yeah, not too many questions here. So, how about using AI for synopsis writing? So a synopsis is just a one-page description of your book. And it's different from a book description because a book description is a piece of copywriting to try and sell your book. So, for instance, one of the things that you don't put in a book description is the ending of your story. In a synopsis, you do put the ending of your story. That's why I usually, when I prompt the AI for a synopsis, I usually tell it to give me a full beginning, middle, and an end in a 3-act structure so that it knows that it needs to give me the ending as well. Because if I don't say that, it will usually give me something more like a book description where it's like teasing what happens at the end. I don't want it to tease. I just want it to tell me exactly what happens at the end of the story. And a prompt that I have found works pretty well. I don't have it offhand. But usually in the brainstorming phase, I get a whole lot of little ideas. And I'll just sort of take everything, the brain dump, right? And put it all into a prompt. And I'll say, please take all of these items and format them into a plausible synopsis for a novel. And it usually does a good job of taking all of those little things and putting it into a novel. I'll find that prompt and maybe do a video on synopsis at some point in the future. Another thing we could take a look at, oh man, there's so many things. I'm going to be doing more videos about Novel Crafter for one. I want to do more videos about fine tuning. That's a really difficult subject right now, and yet I believe that is the future. I could do a whole live stream about it, and I probably will, but I'll just touch on it briefly. I envision a future where every character in your story, every viewpoint character that you have a fine-tuned model for that character, because the character speaks and thinks differently than you might. It's actually a real struggle for authors to try and get their characters to sound different from each other, because by default we tend to write like ourselves, right? And so the dialogue for all of the characters is the same. Well, what if you could train a model on a specific character type? And then anytime you use that model, the prose and the dialogue from that character will sound a certain way. And then you could have, if you switch to a different viewpoint, you get a different viewpoint character, and that character sounds slightly different. It just kind of like puts the art back into AI writing a little bit. This idea of formulating a variety of fine-tuned models that all have slightly different styles, and then you sort of use those styles like a painter would use different shades of paint to formulate your masterpiece. So pretty interesting about that. Something like that could be very interesting. Realism Jared said, how would you prompt AI when writing a synopsis for a 12-book series? I did a video a while back. It's an older video now. I need to probably redo it, about writing a series. And if you're doing a 12-book series, I would actually recommend that you look at the 12-step hero's journey model and see how could you adapt each of those 12 steps into a full book. So you're thinking larger, right? But there's a reason the trilogy works so well, and that's because a trilogy is modeled after the 3-act structure. So each movie has a 3-act structure, but each movie is in a trilogy. Each movie in the trilogy is also a step in the 3-act structure. And so finding a way to think of each step in the hero's journey as a step in as something you could expand to a full book, while also including like your full hero's journey structure within that book, that's the way I would go. And I would work with the AI to do something like that. The problem with just asking the AI to take a story idea and create a series with it is that it will often think of it more in terms of chapters. And so it doesn't actually give you enough material to do a whole book. So you do have to kind of like prompt it to say, hey, give me a book idea for each step of the hero's journey as a series, and make sure each one has a beginning, middle, and an end. You can prompt it like each one should be should have a 3-act structure or something like that. That's what I would do. He said, yes, that's what I was thinking, but I was worried I'll get lost. Yeah, don't worry too much about that. Just it is easy to get lost sometimes, but just try to keep your focus on what it is you're doing, and make sure that make sure you're the human, right? That you're not letting you're using the AI. You're not letting the AI use you, right? And so that will mean you at some point may need to just take ownership and start writing some of the things down yourself. Generally, when I'm doing a series outline, I don't flesh it out too much. I have like maybe a paragraph per book. And then I flesh it out later, especially once I've written the first book. I like to write the first book before I do much planning of the rest of the series. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for being here and for coming with me on this journey. And I'm going to be putting more work into this behind the scenes to get a sense for how many chapters, how many scenes can we make out of all of these different steps in a way that feels like it's well paced and works well with AI as well. So hopefully that won't take me too long, and I'll have something that I can share in the future. But thank you all for being here. I'll see you in the next video.